Reverend Peter, take it away.
Save the world.
Thank you, Reverend Tony. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you here today. Feels like it's been a little while since I've even been at service and been speaking because some other commitments on Sundays have taken precedence. But it's really, really beautiful to be here. And I always feel so connected to the Holy Spirit and Jesus, our elder brother, when I'm here. So it really, really is gratifying for me. And it's gratifying to see all of you here as well. The title of my talk today is May Miracles Shower Upon You. And the reason I picked this, the title of this talk today is because sometimes my best thinking is done in my morning shower when I am thinking about the day and I've had a cup of coffee and I'm starting to, think about what my day is going to be like, what I'm going to do. And oftentimes too, when there is, things that are on my mind that I'm anxious about or troubled about or so on and so forth, I oftentimes somehow get a different perception on things. And sometimes, I actually follow through on the guidance that I get. And sometimes I forget about it and I go back to my ego and I think about things. But for me, and I think probably for all of us, there are maybe some conditions when we're more open to the miracle. For us to experience that shift in perception that A Course in Miracles talks about. And because I'm also a teacher, it makes me think of kind of like learning styles. And if you're, one of the things that you learn when you become a teacher is that we all have different modes of learning. Now, we all learn from every kind of different types of ways. Obviously, we're Course in Miracles students, so we know there is a type of learning that the world doesn't acknowledge, but that we acknowledge. It's an inner kind of learning, an inner dictation, or an inner guidance that comes from teachers. But the Holy Spirit also uses our senses. And so what they've found in education research is that, some people learn better in certain modes. So for example, some folks are auditory learners. That is that they learn from listening, and this is probably my greatest, at least early on in my life, was my mode of learning. I enjoyed listening to stories from family members. And I was actually one of those people that listened to the priest when I went to church as a young boy, and got, and was actually something I didn't know that I was going to be a speaker at churches later on in life, but it certainly was instructive to me. And then some folks learn visually, and I think that's increasingly becoming a mode of learning for all of us because of social media and because of the availability of so much that's on the internet and so on and so forth. Some folks, they say, learn tactilely, they learn by doing things. And some people learn through movement, through their body. So probably all of us learn in all these ways, but we probably have some kind of preference that we have developed for some reason. And the Holy Spirit knows this. The Holy Spirit knows that we have this. So just as like we have learning, preferences, learning styles, I think that as Course of Miracles students, we also have ways in which the Holy Spirit knows when we're ready for the miracle. And there are certain times that this takes place. And so for me, one of those places is like like I said, it's in the shower. For some folks, also another way for me as well is when I'm not thinking about it. When I'm not thinking about a particular problem or situation, it comes to me through a conversation, or it comes to me through, just as I'm driving somewhere, or if I'm walking down the street, if I'm walking on the beach. So for me, that's kind of how the miracles work. One of the things that I've been thinking about lately, and one of the miracles that I'm kind of in the process of unfolding, that's being unfolded before me, involves different forms of attack. And sometimes we get bigger lessons in life, and sometimes, those lessons are perhaps the miracle unfolds in a longer time period. In today's reading that Reverend Vincent read so well, it says, forgiveness cannot be withheld a little. I think what Jesus is saying to us here is that regardless of what the perceived hurt may be, as long as we hold on to any part of a grievance or resentment or a judgment we have toward another, that we're not going to be at peace. The peace that we can have, as is suggested in today's lesson. Also in today's reading was this line: attack in any form is equally destructive. Its purpose does not change. Its sole intent is murder. And what form of murder serves to cover the massive guilt and frantic fear of punishment the murderer must feel? So I was kind of guided to talk a little bit about this today based on a recent experience. And what it made me think about was, well, how do we attack one another? Here we are, Course in Miracles students, or human beings, or what I like to say now is Christlings, to include everybody, every being, and every spirit, whether it's in a humanoid form or not. And I think it comes in various ways. Sometimes we attack or are attacked in a very direct way. Someone just tells us what they think about us or what we're doing, or something that we're doing, or critiquing us, and they do that. And there is such thing as constructive criticism, but we all know the difference. We all know when someone's trying to murder us, and we also know when we're trying to murder somebody else. And let's be clear, the Course in Miracles use the words murder. It doesn't use, oh, well, they were having a bad day. They didn't really mean it. No. Course in Miracles says, we're trying to murder. Okay, so let's just be real about it and let's own up to it. The Course in Miracles also says that that sometimes we'll murder with a smile. We'll say something. Maybe it's sarcasm. Maybe it's gossip. Maybe it's it's putting a person down in a mean-spirited way, and we'll laugh about it. Okay, now and I don't mean that all irreverent humor is meant that way, but sometimes it is, and we know the difference because we know how it feels. Just think about it. Just think about gossip and how relevant, how much we see that in the world today. Oh my gosh, at my workplace, it's kind of rampant. I see it sometimes, and I just try to, I haven't been guided to like call it out right in its face, but I just try to be detached from it, and do something like that as much as I can. We also have to kind of remember that what the Course talks about is that there's this constant ego thing happening, denial and projection, right? So we have to remember that whenever we experience attack, or when we attack, we're just denying the guilt that we feel, just like from the reading that Reverend Vincent said today. It's just a form of denial and projecting out. So they're denying their own guilt, massive guilt, because they're afraid of being punished, or we're denying it and we're projecting it out. And we talked about that before. I think another form of attack that particularly bugs me is the comparison attack. The Course in Miracles says, and this is a quote, the ego literally lives by comparison. Now, I challenge everyone. Sometimes we're not as murderous as others. I don't think we are. We're actually probably a lot kinder because we do try to study the Course in Miracles. But I challenge you to think about the compare the comparison quality of the ego. Do we, in our minds primarily, do we say to ourselves, oh, I'm a better Course in Miracles student than that person, or I do miracles better than another person, or I do miracles more than another person, blah, 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 and compare ourselves to those people, to other people? This is folks, that's a completely kind of, that's an ego thing. Because what we're doing is we're not seeing ourselves in equality with our fellow Christly, right? We're trying to put ourselves above or sometimes below another person. And I believe the Course talks about that as grandiosity. So I think it's just important for us to remember that. You know, most of us are kind of student practitioners, miracle workers in some way, right? But, you know, we might have a tendency to put others on a pedestal, you know, and say, oh, you know, they're so far along, they're so advanced. I guess, you know, we could take a look at Jesus, right? We could say that about Jesus. Oh, Jesus is, you know, the person who's dictated the Course and so on and so forth. But Jesus doesn't put himself on a pedestal. He's right there with us right now. And that's what the Course in Miracles says. That's what Jesus says in the Course. He's elder brother there to guide us along the way. There's nothing that Jesus did that we cannot do. So I just think it's kind of like that measure a little bit of humility that's really, really important. Now, I do want to talk to you about a miracle experience that I've recently had, but based on a really challenging circumstances in my workplace. And I've alluded a little bit to this. I've talked about it in my class on Thursday night. And it was probably like a miracle process that took place around 3 months from beginning to end. And it's very, very interesting to me. Just to give you some context of the experience that I've had, was, you know, I work where I work is at a, you know, I work in a specialized special ed program for students that have emotional disturbance. That's what it's called, emotional challenges, behavioral challenges. It's a very specialized program. And this year a new administration came in with a very kind of a revolutionary kind of approach to administering schools, and kind of a very different ideology than one that I had been used to in the past. So, you know, sometimes I agreed with this approach and sometimes I did not. And I talked about before that, you know, in the past, I'm, you know, like as an educator, I have very strong views about how things should be done. And I see myself as an advocate for my students. So to excuse my language, if something is bullshit, I kind of say it, and I believe in saying that. So that's the most style that I've done in times. Not all the time. Most of the time I'm a nice guy, but sometimes I really get firm with people when I believe that they're doing something that is harmful to the students. So that's my guidance. That's what I feel, right? I'm not saying I'm right. So anyway, I had this experience this year where I had a conflict with a couple of my colleagues, and I was accused of being a racist and a sexist as a result of this conflict. And in the mediation, in fact, I was labeled as a white separatist because of my particular point of view. And oh my gosh, I have to tell you, it was one of the most challenging professional experiences in my life. You definitely, if you want to feel guilt, if you want to feel shame, I mean, for me, then, you know, have this experience. You know, I felt really awful about the whole thing. And, and, you know, all these things came to mind. I'm like, how could they say this? You know, because most of my life, all of my teaching career in San Francisco has been teaching students of color, either African-American, Asian, Latino. That's most of the population. That's just what the data is. So you get defensive, like, how can they say this, you know? And then you think about all the relationships you have in your life, and you have a diversity of folks in your life. And it's very, very, it's a tough lesson to learn. Okay, it's very difficult. And I thought about all that. And then as I was in the shower one recent morning, I've been praying about it. Of course, I've been talking about it, and I finally got above the mirror. I finally got above the battlefield, and I had this experience right here at where Reverend Tony and I live in the shower. And I started thinking about it, and what I saw was my part of this whole conflict, and what I saw was how we were all playing a part. And here's a couple things. This is what I realized. Number one, I kind of threw the first punch, if you will, okay, in parlance, in the sense that I did have a conflict with a colleague, and the colleague offered to help in some technical issue I was having in my class, but my perception was I already solved it, and it was outside their scope of expertise. And I kind of said, you know what, why don't I, here's my part in it. I basically said, rather than, I don't really need your help. I said that kindly though. But how about you focus on doing your job, and that was probably, that's obviously the sarcasm. That was obviously me being irritated by this. And so why did I do that? Well, because I was coming from a place, what the Course talks about, of scarcity. I was coming from a place of lack. I was triggered, my ego was triggered, and I felt attacked because this person was, pushing a button in me about my inadequacy over technology, which I do sometimes feel. And so I kind of attacked back. And so their perception then back was that, that where I was coming from was because I was a person that had sexist and racist views. Now, I didn't necessarily agree with that, but what I could see was that we were all coming from, in this miracle moment that I had, is that we were all coming from, in this attack cycle, from kind of places of inadequacy. Like when we condemn our brothers or sisters or Christlings of things and labels and so on and so forth, and we label them as such, what we're really doing is we're attacking back. Why are we attacking back? Well, because there's a sense of inadequacy. I think I triggered the inadequacy in another colleague, and so they struck back. And so I was like thinking to myself, here you go. So here's the dance of the ego: attack, attack, attack back, and we go after one another. And we have to be really honest. I have to be really honest. It is a form of like kind of murdering. And so, when you attack, that's what you get back. When you love, you get love back. When you attack, you get attack back. So I was able to see this, and I was able to see all of us, kind of the miracle for me was that I was able to see all of us from this perspective. Of course, the miracle says this: the overlooking of the battlefield is now your purpose. Be lifted up from a higher place, look down upon it. From there, your perspective will be quite different. See no one from the battlefield, for there you will look on them from nowhere. So that's what our task really is as miracle workers. It's to respond, not to react. And clearly, the lesson that I have to learn is that, it's much better to respond than to react. And respond from when you are above the battlefield. That's where the real miracle can take place. Now, clearly, in this particular situation, if I had been, more aware of that in the initial process of what was happening, then I would have been coming from a higher place of response, and I wouldn't have had to learn this lesson. But the script is written, and I did have to learn this lesson from the Holy Spirit's point of view, and so that's what had to happen. So my takeaway from this whole situation is that, we really are at times learning. We're learning all the time. And the Holy Spirit does come to us in many different ways. And even in ways that seem by the egoic standards to be, quite upsetting. It's not pleasant to be called a racist or a sexist, especially when you don't feel like you're one. And at the same time, there's a lesson there. The colleague that made this accusation, the person that supported them, and myself, we're all innocent. We're all guiltless. But we're all perceiving, right, from this level. And the miracle really is to have the willingness to stay at it, even through the difficult times, and to see one another as the Christ, to see one another as innocent, to see one another as we truly are, through all our apparent flaws. The Course in Miracles asks us to overlook the flaws that we apparently see in others and look to their innocence and look to their guiltlessness. And so in this age when we live in an egoic world where we label and condemn and judge and do all these things, whether it's an ism or it's a behavior, let's remember that when we're above the battlefield, miracles can shower down upon us all. And being in the miracle moment, that moment of peace and relief and oneness, is definitely preferable. And that's my talk for today. Thanks, everyone.
To peace, woke up my heart to be free, woke up our world, you and me. I've opened up my heart, I'm at the start. I save the world, I save the world.